And we're live. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. Who's joining me live today? Welcome in, ladies. Welcome in. It's been a while, you guys. It's been a while. It's been a minute, they would say. I'm super excited to see you guys today. There's been a lot that has been happening. I will announce more of that as the weeks come by. What's this? But yeah, there's been a lot that has been happening. There's good stuff that I'm planning for you guys. And again, I'll talk about that as we progress throughout today's training. So today's topic is quite interesting. And before I go into it, if this is the first time that you're seeing a training of mine or you're watching a video of mine, you are welcome. My name is Abby, and I help women in the workplace, especially those in leadership. So I help them have influence and balance in their lives. And I also partner with HR teams to develop their leaders and build resiliency in their leadership team. And as part of that work, a lot of the conversations that I've been having with women in leadership, I'm going to be talking about some of them over the coming weeks, but today's topic is focused on certain things that need to be avoided if you are a new leader. So you just got promoted into being a manager, and you're new and you're like trying to figure things out and you're like swimming in the ocean by yourself. I've got you, don't worry. I want to share these 3 pitfalls that you can avoid to increase your influence and avoid your you being undermined in the workplace. Okay. And if you are someone that's already in a leadership role, so you're in senior leadership, you still need to know these things because these are benchmarks to check your performance and see that you are leading your teams appropriately. Okay, don't wait till they throw you under the bus or you're so burnt out that you quit to be able to gauge how well you're performing as a leader. Okay, so welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. Super happy. Today's topic, the more times that I continue to have conversations with women in the workplace and women in leadership roles, there's certain attributes, there's certain similarities that I have noticed that has contributed to women feeling stressed and burned out at work. Okay, now throughout the year, my work has been focused on treating the symptom of burnout and overwhelm. And the more that I continue to work with women, I start to see that we need to start fixing the pipeline from the beginning before it results to being burned out. And so the 3 things that I'm going to share today, these are the things that I've noticed that women who are either stepping into new leadership roles or are already there, they struggle with this a lot. And I'm going to explain almost like the psychology behind why women struggle with these 3 pitfalls, okay? So if you are someone that wants to step into being a manager or you're already a manager, one of the biggest things that is probably on your mind is, how do I make sure that I'm building my influence, I'm helping my team, I'm building more respect between myself and my reports, building more respect between myself and my peers and also my managers or my bosses, and also have time to take care of me, right? And of course your family too. And as part of that shift in mindset, one of the things that I have noticed that many women tend to fall into as a trap when they step into that role of becoming a leader or becoming a manager is that they almost fall into what we call micro managers. So one of the very first pitfalls that I noticed that women tend to fall into is micromanagement. Now, why this is so dangerous is that when a woman is coming to me and she's like, AB, this is happening, I'm so stressed out, blah, 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 blah. Nobody, they don't listen, or they're throwing me under the bus and everything, and I'm listening to her, the conversation and her pain and her problem. What I've noticed is that because when a woman is stepping into a role of leadership, there is a lot on her plate. Okay, there is a lot of the need to want to prove herself, to want to show people that she has earned the right to be in leadership. There is so much pressure to perform at a higher rate when a woman steps into leadership. Now, oftentimes when that need is not managed, when she's not self-aware enough to know that that need is operating in the background, one of the symptoms that starts to show is she micromanaging her reports, and even some cases her peers. And I've also seen it with her bosses. And oftentimes when you are a micromanager, what that just signals to people around you is that you do not trust them. Period. And if we peel the layers behind that, it actually puts you in a very, very bad light, because you come across as a very insecure person. And they say insecure people are one of the most dangerous people to work with, because number one, they're not self-aware enough to know that they're insecure. Number two is that they transfer that insecurity into their teams. Now, when people feel like you don't trust them, that degrades their morale. That further dampens the mood and their productivity in your organization and in your team. Now, what will happen is that the feedback from that is going to feed negatively into how your team is performing, which puts more pressure on you, because your managers and your peers are going to think that you are not doing enough to be able to manage your team, and that's why they're performing lowly. But what you don't know is that you're part of the problem, especially if you have that need to prove yourself and that need goes unchecked. It's going to show up as you micromanaging your team. Now, what do I mean by micromanaging? And let me give you some examples. So in one case, when I was working with a client of mine, she was talking about having some people on her team that she meets with daily, asking for updates daily. And I was very curious, because those situations usually pop up when there's a need for it. So the person isn't performing as they should, and they're probably on some performance improvement plan. And even at that, daily is a bit much. Asking for daily updates is a bit much. If you're not working on a project, there's nothing that is going to be critically affected if you don't get those updates daily. And so I was very curious, and I was asking like, oh, okay, how did this come about? And then, she explained the situation. And, from my perspective, I was like, it sounds like there are too many cooks in the pot. And she asked me, what do you mean? And I said, well, the person that you're having these daily updates, have they proven that they're not effective? She said, no, but that's just like the expectation of the role. And the person who was there before was doing stuff like that. So it's like a continuation. And I'm like, okay, that sounds very interesting, right? But do you need to have daily updates? Like, how is this person responding? And then eventually what it turned out was that this person was actually going to complain to their own peers. Of course, information travels fast. Complain to their other peers, which then almost damage her reputation as this insecure person that is always asking for daily updates. And from an outsider's perspective, I can see why the perception that she's insecure will come in, because even though from her perspective, this was just continuing the process, right? But if you're somebody that is consistently going to ask someone, what did you do today? What did you do? It's a bit much. it's a bit much because there's no space for that person to actually prove themselves in the way that they feel comfortable doing. So that's one example. That's one way it shows up. Other ways is when you ask somebody to handle something, before you give them a chance to do it, you've already jumped in trying to tell them how to do it your own way. I see this a lot. And it's not just in the workplace. I also see it in women's personal lives as well. When they ask their children or their husbands to do something, they start telling them to do it this way because their way is the best, right? If somebody else does it their own way, then it's not good enough. That's actually a sign of micromanaging. If you're doing that at home, I guarantee you're doing that somewhere at work, because what you do in one place, you transfer to other places. Okay? And the root of all of this whole micromanaging, when we dig a little deeper, there is some insecurity there that you need to work through. You need to work through. And so because some women will say, well, AB, what if this person isn't performing right? There's a project that is critical. If that is the case, communicate that clearly, that there is a need for that, and then observe. Okay, let it be clear to your reports and the people that you work with, this project is critical because we're looking to achieve this. This is why we may need to get more updates than usual. And even at that, daily updates, it's a bit much. It's much. Unless it's a critical situation, it's much. But if you have to do that, communicate that clearly and get their feedback. I don't want to move ahead of myself, but that's the first pitfall. Okay, let's move to number 2. The second pitfall, and it's closely linked to number 1, but the second pitfall that I see this all the time in women, oh my gosh, is their fear in delegating tasks. And the first point that I talked about, micromanaging, and I talked about, insecurity. In the second case, they believe, they believe that if they delegate work, that it's going to rub badly on their reputation. That they actually believe that it's going to hurt them if they delegate. In other cases, is because they don't trust the person. So it's very closely linked to number 1. Now, the problem with not being the kind of person that can delegate is you will, let me repeat myself, you will burn yourself out. Period. Period. Even before I talk about other effects, your health alone, give yourself 3 to 4 months, and this is me being very conservative because I've seen this timeline and the whole process of burning out within a month or 2. You will burn yourself out. Period. And then when you're burned out, you will also burn your team out because stress is transferable. It's transferable. And so if you are in a leadership role, you need to take responsibility to be able to manage your stress levels. And one of the ways you can do that is by leaning into the people that you are guiding and leading to take on equitable responsibilities that they can handle and free up your time to be able to do higher level tasks and also guide and provide the coaching that they need. Because if you cannot delegate, I guarantee you that there's no space in your life or no space at work to be able to mentor and coach your reports. There's no space because you're so focused on doing the task. And if you're stepping into the role of a leader or a manager and you're new at this, you can see why it's easier for you to fall into that trap, because you've been for a great number of years in your career, you've been the doer, you've been the specialist and all that stuff. And now when you're stepping into a role where you're managing people, that's no longer your job. That's no longer your job. Now your job is to lead and guide and coach and mentor the people to achieve, the people that report to you, to achieve a certain outcome. So let me repeat myself. The second pitfall is not knowing how to delegate and even being afraid of it. Okay? Being afraid of it because you think it will rub negatively on you. When you burn yourself out because you've taken on too much, it will rub negatively on you anyways. Okay? Number 2 is even not knowing how to delegate. So oftentimes women will ask me, okay, AB, yeah, I want to delegate, but this person doesn't seem responsible enough to be able to take up that task. And I say, I ask them questions because oftentimes when something is showing up, it's not one thing that led to that outcome. It's a combination of multiple things. And one of the common traits that I've seen show up within a dynamics where delegation is an issue is that there are people or someone on that team that is taking on too much than they need to, and so the other members of the team do not feel challenged enough to step up. And so even when they are assigned the things that they can do, because the dynamics of that team is that 1 or 2 people are primarily responsible for the outputs of your team and the rest are not, they don't step up. They don't step up. Another way I've seen this play out is very closely linked to number 1 is the manager, I see this a lot in women because they're trying to prove themselves. They start to do the things for those employees when they drop the ball once. You are not to do that. Because when you start to create certain unhealthy dynamics where people think that if they drop the ball, you pick it up, you create codependency within your team. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem because now all of a sudden you have what we call the good cop, the bad cop, the responsible employee and the irresponsible one. And you as a leader and a manager, you created that dynamics. You created that dynamics. And again, ladies, it's not about, this is not so that you feel like, oh my gosh, what have I done and all that stuff. No. This is for awareness so that if you are preparing yourself to be in management role, you start to recognize how to avoid these things. Okay? If you're someone that struggles with delegating, one of the major things that you need to start to look into to work on yourself is your ability to trust others. And frankly enough, our ability to put trust in others comes from our ability to trust ourselves. If you're someone that cannot trust yourself, it will show up in the way that you treat others. If you feel like you don't have control over your life, it will show up in the way that you treat others. And one of the ways it will show up is that you don't want to let go of control. You don't want to let people take on more because it will take away your validity as a person. And pretty much you will start to feel like you're worthless. That's a different issue. But I feel like all of this is tied into how you see yourself as a person, how you show up in the workplace, how you show up as a leader and manager is tied to how you see yourself as a person. It's tied to all of that. And when you have your worth tied to your work, the issues that I'm calling right now, your inability to want to delegate or even know how to, micromanaging people, when it's all tied, you will struggle with these things because the failure of your work will prevent you from allowing other people step into your sphere to be able to help you accomplish the goals that you've been set out to accomplish. Okay, we'll talk more about self-esteem and self-worth and how many women have, pretty much tied their worth to their work and what it does to them. Okay, let's move on to step number 3. Number 3 is inability to listen to feedback. Oh gosh. Ladies, let me tell you a story. I tell you guys that a lot of the lessons that I talk about and the things that I teach you guys, a lot of it is from my mistakes. And I remember when I had, I had gotten a job with this organization, and they had hired me to pretty much set up the department, or set up the unit. And at that time, I didn't have any manager. I was reporting directly to a director. So I was pretty much performing as team lead. And so I remember we were in a meeting, and my director, she was giving feedback on some of the work outputs that I was putting out. Before this woman could complete her sentence, I had already blurted out, that's not the reason for that. It's the reason is this. Like, so defensive. Before she could finish, I had already, no, that's not how it works. We did this, we did that. I was so embarrassed after I left that meeting. I didn't know why I was doing that. I didn't know. And I'll tell you guys why I was doing that. I noticed that when I finished that meeting, I was so embarrassed. I was just like, oh my gosh. And when I did that, let me tell you what she did. She's like, no, AB. Oh no, I'm not saying that, the work you're doing is not good. No, I know you guys, you're doing the best and everything. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just talking about this aspect and all that stuff, And after she said that, I calmed down, but I was still feeling very embarrassed because I wasn't the only one on that call with her. There was another person from another team that was there. And when I think back now, because I've had many instances where people have tried to offer constructive feedback before they finish. Like, I don't even let them finish. Before they finish, it's defense mode, how to defend every single thing that I've done, defend this, defend that. It's almost like, how dare you give me that feedback? Who do you think you are? Are you guys Spice Girls? Are you guys Spice Girls fans? The song just came to my head. But who do you think you are? How dare you give me that feedback? I'm doing the best work here. That kind of perspective. Do you guys know why I was behaving like that? I'll tell you why. It's because I was hired in this role, oh my gosh, to build something from scratch, to build a whole unit from scratch, to come up with the processes, everything. And so the work became my personal pride. Like, it became so personal for me. It was like I was building, it was almost like I was raising a child. Let's do it that way. So they giving me feedback on my work felt like they were saying your child isn't good enough and all that stuff. And the main part to that was two parts. Number one was I felt so much pressure to prove to them that you did not make a mistake by hiring me for this role. That's the first thing. The second thing was, this felt like life or death. This is my life's work. I set this thing up. How can you give me this feedback? That's what my brain was hearing. And the reason why my brain was picking up that feedback as a threat is because, number one, I was in a state of stress. So when you're in a state of stress, your brain distorts reality. Your perception is flawed. And so everything becomes a threat to you, whether it is a threat or not. It's just the reality of how your body is operating at that time. And so because I was under stress and my body was perceiving these feedback as stress, the reaction was fight. Again, when you're under stress, your body either fights, and some of the symptoms of fighting, aggression, shouting, yelling, cursing, that's fighting. That's actually a symptom of fighting. Or flight. You disappear. You ignore. You don't respond. You ghost people. That's a sign of flight. You don't take any action. No. Not taking action is freeze. The third one is freezing, where you just don't take any action. You leave things as the status quo because you're so afraid. You don't want to do anything. That's freeze. In my own case, the response I was having was fight. And so back to being unable to listen to feedback, this is where it becomes interesting, especially for women. Because there's this narrative that's being promoted, like the workplace isn't safe for women, they're being targeted, this is happening to them, they're being unfairly treated, there's bias and stuff like that. What we don't understand is that these narratives, they sow a seed of a threatening reality for women. So even before they step into the workplace, they already have a perspective that the workplace is like war. And when you're fighting war, all is fair. And what we don't understand is that moving with that narrative puts your body in a state of stress. And so when you get into a management role where you are now more visible, so the actions that you take now have a greater impact. You have more people to look up to, more people to manage. This accelerates and starts to alter your perception of the work that you're doing. Okay? And so this could actually affect the way that you listen to feedback. This doesn't mean that it's all your fault. Please don't get that. It's just if you're noticing that you're stressing or you're unable to listen to feedback, if you're wondering that, one of the reasons could be your perception of what the feedback is. Now, I know not all feedback is good feedback. That's true. But when you are in a place of relaxation and somebody tells you something that you know does not align with you, your response is different than when you are in a state of stress. Okay? Now, the thing with being in management role is that if you don't listen to feedback, there's no trust being built between you and your reports or you and your manager. And if there's no trust being built, your days are numbered in that position. Let me just be frank with you. Your days are numbered in that position because now you won't be able to do the work that you have been hired to do. You won't be able to motivate the people that work for you. You won't be able to help them. Okay? So it's important. Number 3 is learning how to accept, to receive and accept feedback. It doesn't mean that you now listen to people criticizing you and all that stuff. It just means you allow them to say what they need to say. You take the ones that you feel align with where you're going, and the ones that you feel don't, you leave them alone, or you have a conversation with them to get clarity on what it is that you're expecting. That's actually my approach. Get clarity on what that feedback is. And part of wanting to get clarity means you've received it. You've accepted it, you're evaluating it. The next step is getting clarity on what the line of action should be done to help you with improving that. Okay? So ladies, I don't want this video to be too long, but if you're just joining us, I talked about 3 pitfalls to avoid if you're stepping into the role of a leader or a manager and you don't want your reputation to be undermined or your credibility to be undermined. The first one is avoid being a micromanager. And part of this reason is not trusting people enough and you feeling insecure in yourself that you cannot help or give people the space to be able to do what they've been hired for. You feel like you have to have control over everything, okay? That's a sign of that you're insecure and you need to fix that. Number 2 is, what was number 2? Right, inability to delegate. So making sure that you don't become the kind of person that feels like you need to do everything by yourself because you don't trust people and you think it's gonna look bad on you. Making sure that you're the kind of person that can give people space to step up, and you don't jump in and do the work that they have been hired to do. Okay. Number 3 is not being able to listen to feedback. You want to make sure that as you are on this role of a manager or a leader, you are listening, receiving, and accepting feedback, and where you need to have conversations to get clarity on what that feedback was, you open those lines of communication so that what needs to be done to improve can be done. Okay? So those are the 3 things that we talked about. And just before I round up here, if you are someone who is struggling, you're burnt out at work, and you're struggling with even just, you're struggling with work. You don't want to wake up in the morning and go to work because you're so tired, you're so stressed out. If you're a woman in leadership, you just find that you're just pretty much digging your own grave, and your health, your well-being, all of that it's not operating at a way that you want it to operate. Let's have a conversation and let's chat and see how we can get you to a healthy well-being. And if you're in HR and you're watching this, one of the key things that I would say is making sure that these 3 pitfalls that I talked about, micromanaging, inability to delegate, not being able to receive feedback, as you're doing hiring and placing managers, these are critical things you need to start to look out for, because these 3 things will directly impact the ability of that manager or leader to improve employee engagement. And when people are disengaged, that affects the productivity of the organization, and you guys are losing money, and eventually the person will quit or more people will quit. Okay? But other than that, ladies, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I will see you next week.